Joining me into this discussion about Afghanistan, America's presence in Afghanistan, as well as Afghan refugees, is is my friend Kristy Perano and her friend. You want to introduce yourself? Sorry, the name is actually, for those watching, your full name is actually not appearing on screen. So please feel free to introduce yourself.
You can call me M Kurd,
M Kurd.
or just Kurd is fine. Yeah.
All right. So, why don't you tell our audience a little bit about what you do and what issues you're trying to bring attention to?
Well, we are a group of Kurds and friends of Kurds who believe in a Kurdish and American alliance and concerned about. We're American Kurds concerned about the national security of United States and the alliance with the Kurdish people in the Middle East. So in this sense, our scope is really a little bit wider. It's more than Kurds. We're involved with Afghan evacuation as well through Kristy and her friends. So basically, we are an alliance of concerned citizens about U.S. allies. Shortly, this is what we do. We try to provide humanitarian aid and education on, Kurdish culture and Afghan issues.
Wow. And I think I've actually, for anyone who's watched, people like Cassie Dillon on her podcast, you'll know that America has a very tight-knit relationship, or used to have a very tight-knit relationship with the Kurds. They were often one of the few allies we could really count on in the Middle East. But back in 2019, the Trump administration made the decision to withdraw troops from Turkey and basically allowing for Erdogan to go in and attack the Kurdish troops there and citizens there. And so I'm wondering, how has our relationship with the Kurds improved since that particular low point, or are things still not what they used to be? And Kristy, you can also jump in if you want to as well.
Who should start first? Do you want me to answer that one, Chris?
Right. So sorry if this is a
Go
bit like
ahead.
esoteric. I just, this is something that was on my mind. It's something that I know has been an ongoing issue. I just want to know if we can talk more about it.
Yeah. Well, that was an unexpected decision. The Kurdish people, in the history throughout especially the last 3-4 decades, have a good relationship with the Republican Party. The Republicans always been the party that helped the Kurds. With the no-fly zone in 90s, during the Father Bush administration, which saved millions of Kurdish lives from the brutal regime of Saddam Hussein, and after that, with the continuous support till the President Trump era, it wasn't an unexpected event, really. But I think one of the reasons why it was decided that way is that the paradigms are different. We were talking about Syria now, and there's Turkey involved, which is a NATO ally, and they have concerns, which is a discussion whether these concerns are legitimate or not. I think President Trump was playing both sides, trying to make both sides happy, ended up actually making no sides happy. But still there is a big love and admiration towards United States and American culture, American democracy. It's still an inspiration for Kurds, and it really played a big role in. And I'm saying this, maybe you never heard this before, but help a lot for Kurds, especially the Kurmanji Kurds, who are in northern Kurdistan, what we call Turkey today, and Syria, to change their view from a Marxist point of view to more like a Western democracy uh, way of life, because the Kurmaji movement in Turkey and Syria, they in 4 years ago, it started as a very radical Marxist movement, but over the decades, it changed. The leadership changed, the ideology changed, and I think that's was one of the reasons that United States felt comfortable to be partners with the Kurds in Syria, regardless of Turkey's opposition.
And we'll get to Turkey's opposition in just a second, but I'd like to maybe highlight a particular moment, in Kurdish-U.S. relations, and that was the fight against ISIS, because my understanding is that the Kurds played a big role in the coalition against ISIS, and at least within Iraq, it helped them to establish what is essentially their own, if not a state, like autonomous region. And so maybe you'd like to talk more about this particular fight, because I think it was, you know, I think many of my viewers who are not as familiar with the history of U.S. Kurdish relationships might like to know about this, because it was a particularly high moment for the United States, was their cooperation with the Kurds against ISIS.
Yes. Sorry, I'm taking over, Christy. I'm gonna answer to that question. Uh, the ISIS came out of all these years of radical Islam growing, starting with Al Qaeda, political Islam, and turning into Al Qaeda kind of organizations. And with the void in Iraq, they grew and they attract international attention. It kind of the regional powers, I'm talking about Russia, the Syrian regime, Turkey, and Iran, they kind of at the beginning like watched to see where it goes, and sometimes even they supported it, but it really became a big like global problem for United States national security. And at that point, uh, you know, United States wasn't willing to lose any lives in the Middle East, in Afghanistan and in Middle East. And though they were supporting the oppositions, including the Kurds, with the air forces, not on the ground, but on the ground, they worked with the Kurdish forces, starting with maybe earlier to 2013, with the Kobani siege being the peak of the alliance partnership with the Kurds, where um, the American, I will say, where what do you call, Pentagon discovered that there is a really zealous population of Kurds in northeast and northern Syria who are thirsty for freedom, because Kurds in Syria were not even till like 2014 were not allowed to be Syrian citizenship, were not granted to them, and there is an enemy like ISIS, which is a very dark ideology, and they basically butchering anybody that they were facing, and they were successful until they met with the Kurds in northern Syria. They were trained and equipped by United States, and they really did a good job in defeating the ISIS all the way to Raqqa, to their capital, and eventually they finished off ISIS and imprisoned the remaining. With the Battle of Kobani, they destroyed around 2,000, 2,500, like really, um, what do you call them, the main commander, the generals of ISIS, with the siege of Kobani, and with the capture of Raqqa. They finished off the caliphate with the help of the United States, and they capped there are currently two camps, with the whole camp being the biggest one. They keep these ISIS fighters in those prisons, which is around 10,000 population. So that was the a great success, especially the Kurdish women, YPJ, which is in Kurdish, it is Yekeneyin Parasını Gel, the women protection units. They were the fear for ISIS. The ISIS's nightmare was, if you watch these documentaries with the radio talks, how they back and forth responding to ISIS and how they were fearlessly fighting these these radical groups who in their beliefs, if they were killed by women, they're not going to make it to heaven. And YPJ really took good advantage of this and made sure that they don't make it to heaven.
Yes, so that's an incredible moment. I think that for those who are not as familiar with the history of U.S. Kurdish relations should just listen to that bit again because it really helps to explain, just how much the Kurds have been there to fight alongside the United States. And right now, I just want to address a little bit of current events. Right now, Sweden and Finland are in the process of getting approved to join NATO, but from my understanding, as a condition of that, Turkey is making some demands regarding certain people in those countries that they regard as being extremist or being as associated with a group known as the PKK. And I'm just want to know, maybe Kristy maybe can jump in here if you can speak, just to whether Turkey's claims are completely meritless or whether there's something to what they're saying, and as well as why at least Erdogan would seem to want to really stick it to the Kurds if there's no merit to any of his claims. I'm just, because this is a current event that's going on, I'm just curious to know how the Kurds play into this particular into this particular time in history.
Okay, sure. So I mean, I guess I would start off by saying that the PKK is different from the YPG, and I mean we have friends that will and M Kurd could also probably explain why. I mean, the PKK is, even the US, even for the US to list the PKK as a terrorist group is probably because of pressure from Turkey. I mean, I think the majority of the issues between Turkey and the Kurds, or what Turkey's saying, that, oh, this is a threat to our security, much more of that is just like trumped up to give Turkey an excuse to go after an ethnic group that they don't like. And so I mean, other countries like Pakistan, well, I mean, they'll kill some Pashtun and then they'll say, oh, well, this person was clearly with the Taliban. It's like, well, we shot him and then we dumped this gun next to his body, which proves that he was a terrorist. And Turkey will do the same thing. It's like they go shoot civilians in Syria, like shoot some 10-year-old kid and be like, oh, we took out PKK terrorists. So I think like PKK is a group. But I think a lot of even when Turkey kills someone and claims they're part of PKK, sometimes the only evidence they have that someone is a terrorist is because they spoke Kurdish. And then Turkey goes, oh, well, let's see, you speak the same language as PKK and you're the same ethnicity as PKK, so therefore you must be part of PKK. So, we have to get rid of you. So, I mean, I don't believe that Turkey has presented compelling evidence that these individuals in these countries actually pose a concern to Turkey. I think it's just something that they can use to blackmail the entire world to try to get back at Kurds. So yeah, I would not. I view Turkey and as well as Pakistan as kind of friends in name only, where they do both purport to be U.S. allies and purport to be fighting terrorism. And sometimes they do have to cough up a terrorist here and there, like a real terrorist, because the U.S. is like, hey, we know this guy is there. Or sometimes the U.S. takes out an ISIS commander that's in Turkey's jurisdiction and it doesn't tell Turkey because like they know that that person might not be where they know they are if they do tell Turkey. So yeah, I mean, whenever Pakistan or Turkey or whatever says that, oh, we have security concerns with this person, we think they're a terrorist, that has to be taken with a major grain of salt, because it's oftentimes just an excuse to go after a political enemy.
So it's good to know, that Turkey's claims are meritless, because I also very, very much sympathize with the Kurdish cause and the Kurdish people. I think, quite frankly, when the British and the French carved up the Middle East after the First World War, their biggest mistake was not giving the Kurds a state. But before I get to that question, I guess I'll leave with my penultimate question is what, and I guess I can bring M Kurd back in here. What are the ongoing issues that your organization is most concerned with, and like what is it that you want people who are watching this podcast to be aware of, so they can maybe get involved themselves if they can?
First of all, thank you for. I would love to say one thing about the PKK, and thank you for
Okay, go
bringing this.
ahead.
And thank you, Kristy, for laying the skeleton of the argument. Basically, that's what happened. The PKK, first of all, became a social movement, a social political movement, rather than an armed group, as it started as a tiny group in Lice, Diyarbakir, in Turkey, in the early 70s, and in the late 70s, and was designated as terrorist organization by US upon the demand of Turkey. Though the PKK leadership, they signed the agreement at the what was that city, Geneva Convention, that they will not attack any civilians with it. They were very consistent in that agreement. Mostly, maybe sometimes they were not, with their offshootings, radical offshootings, doing some car bombings, which usually PKK was rejecting those groups, and they changed, and became like a social movement now, and but the United States still keeping them with the name PKK in the terrorist organization, which the PKK, which stands for Parti Kerkeri Kurdistan in Kurdish Workers' Party. I mean, People's Workers' Party, but it doesn't exist anymore. It became a brand name. There are offshoots of it, groups of it now, who are ideologically affiliated with that ideology, with the Kurds in Turkey being the base. So that's why as I said, United States is putting itself in a difficult situation by giving Turkey this card of playing, saying you are supporting a PKK, a terrorist organization, because Turkey is basically saying we are supporting ISIS, a terrorist organization, because you are supporting a terrorist organization, which one is a social movement. It's, as we said, it's a Kurdish independence freedom movement. Other is radical, violent terrorist organization that destroys everything that it encounters. But anyways, I think this needs to be changed. With Turkey putting pressure on Finland is a good example of this, because those people that they demand from those countries, they're PKK movement affiliated, and some of them are elected officials. But for Turkey, they are terrorists. It doesn't matter who you are, what you do. If you are Kurds and demand freedom for Kurds, you're labeled as a terrorist. As our organization, your question, we are trying to do many things as much as we can, and one of our goal is to work with as many organizations as possible, with Kurdish organizations, and we keep our vision and mission very wide. Currently, we are working with a couple of prominent Kurdish organizations in the United States, and we're supporting some humanitarian programs in the Middle East. And we are trying to really, as volunteer ambassador of the face of United States, Americans, to show the Kurds that we are with you. Americans are with you. We are still allies, and we are together in this fight against terrorism and for your uh, right to be free. So that's basically what we are trying to do. I think Kristy would give a way better answer to your second question.
Yeah, Kristy, you want to jump in here?
Yeah, sure. So yeah, so we started as the Kurdish Alliance of North America, so like more focused on Kurds, and then we kind of broadened our mission to be supporting U.S. allies on the war on terror. So for our Kurdish programs, we're trying to domestically promote Kurdish culture, like educating Americans on the Kurdish U.S. alliance and how beneficial that has been to, well, actually really to both sides in terms of peace and stability. And then we have done some humanitarian aid for Kurdish families in need. And we've also done some just like education with also the general public and try and like elected officials about the issue. And then most of the helping US Afghan allies has been more humanitarian aid, which is a tremendous need since the collapse of the Afghan government. Afghanistan's like 80% of their GDP just evaporated overnight. And so even if someone is not a US ally, they still have trouble surviving in Afghanistan now because there's a shortage of jobs and food and medical care for the entire population. But then that's compounded if someone did work for the US because it makes it much more risky for them to be out trying to like find a manual labor job or something like that, that otherwise they might be able to at least try to survive with, getting a coal mining job or whatever. But like if your boss is the Taliban and then they figure out who you are, they can still kill you. So despite the international claims that, oh, the Taliban is reformed and they're not really terrorists anymore, they're just kind of conservative political party, like that is really a lie. I mean, they are, well, they have in some cases like brought in outside groups to like teach them how to do like basic government functions. Like they can't even print passports. They buy passport books from Lithuania, and then they had to like not kill a few of the old government workers so they could try to run their government. Basically, the highest level ones were rich enough, they fled, and the lowest level ones, the Taliban was like, okay, we actually don't know how to do anything, so we'll hire you back to help us run a government. And the mid-level ones are the ones that are like in hiding, and like the Taliban would kind of like to just dispose of them because maybe they were a little too close to the former government that didn't support the Taliban, but they're also not wealthy enough to just like have their condo in Abu Dhabi and enjoy life. So, but yeah, our focus is in our organization, it has more been the US allies and those that are in some stage in the US visa process, which is extremely slow and backlogged and very discouraging both for us and the Afghans. There are some people getting out, like a trickle getting out with some kind of behind the scenes State Department work, but the vast majority of those that were in the system were supposed to be evacuated a year ago were not evacuated. And then there has been, like, the State Department has been doing a little bit to try to help evacuate them over the last year, but it's been extremely slow. So that's frustrating. But we have done some like collecting data and pushing people's data to the State Department. We do have a way to do that, and we've done that for a handful of families. And we really only have a budget to support a handful of families, but we have been doing some humanitarian aid for families living in hiding and working on their US visa process.
All right. And just one last question, I guess, for the both of you. I guess I've saved this for the grand finale. But I think that I'm just curious to know, whether there is hope among the people that you work for, or work with for the maybe the eventual possibility of a Kurdish state, either in part or in potentially all of the historic territory of the Kurdish people. I'm just curious to know if that is something that the people that are hoping for, whether maybe it's like something that could potentially happen. And this is a question for both of you.
Well, so far, dear Jonathan, looks like that United States does not want each country have its, like, one Kurdistan in Turkey, one in Syria, one in Iraq, and one in Iran, like an independent Kurdistans, so to speak.
Right.
They want to respect the territory of those countries, but trying to support a democratic model where all minorities can have a say in the constitution, have elections, where can they live together peacefully. This is what's happening in Iraq right now. There is a Kurdish regional government in north of Iraq.
10 o'clock p.m.
That's my computer, by the way. You keep going.
Mm.
It's actually
Yeah.
not 10 o'clock p.m.
Yeah, so they ran for a referendum, independence referendum, and it was not supported by any, of course, naturally, any neighboring countries, and United States was silent about that, which is basically not support. So far in the horizon, it doesn't look like a united Kurdistan. But you ask, what is the pulse of Kurdish people? It's beating for an independent Kurdistan. Any Kurds in Turkey, Syria, Iraq, Iran, eventually, just like everybody else, you and me, they want to be free, independent, speak their own language, practice, because the language is banned, this is a natural human, right from birth. They want, and it's a big population. We're talking about a population bigger than Canada's, 40 million ethnic group, and the land is as big as Nebraska state. I don't know if you know how big is Nebraska, but same area, half of California. Let's say like this, as big as half of California. People wants to live freely, and eventually, I hope it happens.
And that sense of a beating heart for nationhood is something I get. A century ago, my ancestors moved back to what was then known as the land of Palestine to potentially establish a Jewish state in Israel, and look at us, that came to be. I certainly think that you guys deserve the same thing, and I really hope that it does happen, in whatever form it ends up happening to be. M Kurd, Kristy, I want to thank you guys so much for coming on the show. I really hope that the people who are watching get to know a bit more about what you guys do and why America's relationship with the Kurdish people is so important. And I want to thank you guys for coming on to explain that to us.
Oh, thanks for having us.
Thank you for having us, Jonathan. Thank you.